Welcome our Revolution NOLA membership. My name is David Alvarez, here, member of the steering committee. We have interviewed the 4 candidates for the House Representatives District 93 open seat that's coming up for election on March the 24th. Please listen to the answers and decide whom best represents your best interests and whom may be our voice in the state House of Representatives to help open the door for progressive policies and lawmaking that's going to help and improve our quality of life. Once again, listen to the questions, make that vote. Thank you very much. Welcome. We're here with District 93 Louisiana Legislative candidate Kenny Bordes. How do you do?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We're gonna get started right now with our questions. This is under the title of long-term structural policies.
Okay.
All right. So ballot initiatives exist in many states across the United States. Unfortunately, in the state of Louisiana, we do not have that ability for the population to place something upon the ballot through public referendum. We don't have that. So would you be willing to support, introduce, or champion a constitutional amendment to allow and expand petition-motivated ballot initiatives in our state?
You know, you see it all the time, and something that's always kind of aggravated me a little bit about our election process is there are constitutional amendments always on the ballot. There's always an amendment for, a myriad of things, right? But those things are passed in the House, right? And then thrust upon you and then sold to you in ways that by the parties that really want them to pass, right? You get their spin on it, and then some other party will give you their spin. But like you said, there's never really the people putting something on the ballot that they want. And I think that would be a good idea. So I would support that, to answer your question directly. And the reason for that kind of ties into one of my overarching plans in District 93 for my representation of District 93 for my plan of transparency and accountability. Like I've always said, the 3-part plan, on the 3rd part, it involves neighborhood meetings every month in a different neighborhood in the district where I can speak to everyone who's in the district, right? And they can tell me what they want me to bring to Baton Rouge. They can tell me the things that they need, they want to see, and then they can understand the things that are going on. Because every vote that I make isn't a personal vote, right? It's the district's vote. And so I think that if there's that interaction, if people's part in the process they didn't perceive it to end at the voting booth, and they continued on with their civic engagement, especially considering it's their seat in government. This is their seat in the Louisiana House in District 93. I want to make sure that their voice is heard, and there's no better way to do that than ballot measures like you're talking about.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about home rule and the state giving control of local policies to local governments. Policies which prove overwhelmingly popular with New Orleans residents, raising minimum wage, affordable housing mandates, are often attacked through preemption by the state legislature. What would be your approach to returning this power to the people?
And this is another thing I've said constantly throughout my campaign here, is who better to determine what's best for New Orleans than New Orleans, right? We elect people here at the city council to make decisions for us. We just had a big election, right? So if those people are the ones that we're electing, they should be the ones to determine things like minimum wage, obviously through the vote of the people and the voice of the people. We should not be defaulting to the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour, right? $290 a week for a 40-hour work week. Who can survive on that? Maybe in other parts of the country you can, but we can't be last in everything in Louisiana. We're one of 5 or 6 states not to pass a state minimum wage. And what does that mean? Even the state of Louisiana, in my opinion, to your point in your question, isn't the one that New Orleans needs to determine its minimum wage, right? Yes, you need to take that roadblock away. Let New Orleans, and that also goes into schooling, right? We have that Act 91 with schools. The state is passed Act 91, which only gives the Orleans School Board oversight, really no other power in their school system. There has to be a balancing there. We're electing people to the school board. We're electing people to the city council. Those are the people that need to make the decisions based on quality of life, minimum wage, and education. And I've always said that, and so I support that, obviously.
Well, you brought up Act 91, if I may just ask you a follow-up. What would your legislative package or mandates be to change how we're governed locally under Act 91?
I think that Act 91 strips too much from our local governing bodies. You talk to enough people who are subjected to the public school system here, you realize that the community engagement is lacking, right? It's not like it was before. And you also realize that these people have lost their voice. Parents, students, they don't have any control over what's going on in their schools. And Act 91 assures that, right? It says that you can have oversight. You can tell me that this teacher's not doing a good job, or this school CEO or principal is not doing a good job, but we can take your recommendation and throw it in the trash. That stymies a population in New Orleans, all these people and these teachers and these community members' ability to even interact with their school, right? If their voices aren't being heard. Some charter schools are good, okay? We're also dealing with a situation where the grading of our schools is on a curve. What happens when that curve goes away? These schools that are at C, B, maybe D, they're going to drop, right? We're on that curve, and through the federal legislation that's coming into effect, we need to find out, is legislation going to keep that curve there or not? And is that curve a good thing, right? Because is it just giving us a false assurance of what our schools are doing? Point is, you do need to address Act 91, and I think you need to have communities a little bit more involved, just for the reasons that we stated in your first question, that we elect these people in the school board to be our voice, right? These are our elected officials for our schools and our communities. And if you take too much of the community out of the schools, you're going to lose that identity, right? The identity of what is New Orleans. That's just my opinion on it.
Okay. Criminal justice, we're going to talk a little bit about criminal justice. So there's an initiative to end cash bails. Cash bail in which an accused must offer money as surety for appearance at trial effectively means that the plurality of people living paycheck to paycheck accused of even a minor crime will be incarcerated for unacceptable periods of time, regardless of guilt. Obviously, this causes them to miss work time, even though their work time is only paid probably at $8 or $9 an hour.
Right.
Pre-trial periods of incarceration of 1 year are not unheard of. CNN reported that 34% of Americans effectively have no savings, with a further 35% having less than $1,000 in their savings account. What would you support, or further, would you champion a bill to end cash bail for minor offenses?
Absolutely. Look, I'm sorry, is that the question?
Cash bail. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a big problem. And this is something I deal with in my practice a lot. And I see it happening a lot. A friend of mine who I went to law school with works for Vice News up in New York. And actually there's a story about, somebody going to jail for, like years over marijuana. We had the issue of the guy trying to go to jail for 15 years for a quad bill for stealing a Snickers bar, right? These minor offenses that it's just egregious. The thing about my candidacy in this race is I've dealt with this in the trenches. I've had clients. I've had to fight these issues. I've sometimes taken money out of my own pocket to help to get these clients out of jail, right? Because they don't belong there, right? So that they can aid in their own defense. Because one thing you also lose is the ability to aid in your own defense when you're in a justice system and a jail where there's not a lot of communication. Your clients sometimes, half the time, aren't even brought to their hearings, right? So you're sitting in there. They don't have time to meet with you. If they do have time to meet with you, it's 2 minutes before the trial. I mean, ask a public defender how much time, on average, they get to spend with their clients, right? Because these are people, like you said, that can't afford private representation. I think the average time is 6 or 8 minutes that they get to spend with one of their clients before they go to a hearing. I mean, there's all kinds of constitutional violations, in my opinion, that happen with this. And I do disagree, obviously, with the cash bails. It's obviously a money-making scam. We have the issue of debtor prisons and things like that. And any legislation and reform that I can be a part of, and I'll champion, I'll carry the flag for, to ensure that those things because it also stifles our justice system, right? I mean, how many times you go into a hearing where someone who is in jail, who doesn't need to be in jail, is not there, and it has to be rescheduled, or they're lost in the system somewhere else, or like I said, they're not allowed to aid in their own defense, and it's a process that continues on and on and on, and it's fun. It's driven by nothing but revenues and money for the bail bonds people. So.
A follow-up. The movement to end cash bail as well as financing courts through fees has recently gained momentum. Larry Krasner, recently elected DA for Philly, banned cash bail for many charges, including possession of marijuana under 5 pounds, retail theft, and non-residential trespass. Do you support decriminalization or legalization beyond of recreational cannabis?
Beyond recreational, as in like, or would I support recreational? Yeah, of course. I think that's the direction we're heading. You know, Louisiana has been last in a lot of things, as we've discussed. I don't want to be last in this. There's obviously money to be made here. I know there's a scare with the Attorney General in D.C., what they were going to do in Colorado. They were going to maybe try and do some enforcement thing on the federal level. I think that went away. I think that Louisiana needs to take a serious look at this, especially given the revenue and budget issues that we're having right now. Mm-hmm. And in addition to cannabis, there's also we need to look at legalized sports gambling, which from what I understand is an extra $200 million a year, just based on that from the LED estimates that we could get. So if we have budget issues, let's look to real budget solutions, and especially solutions that are coming one day, whether people like it or not. Mm-hmm. So let's not be last, is what I'm saying.
Would you be willing to dedicate some of those funds that are generated from either legalization or from gambling to the problems that it's going to cause, like addiction?
Absolutely. When you have an extra revenue stream, and hopefully our budget situation is fixed by the time these things happen, or fixed today. And so today in the special session, there's a vote going on, right? Yeah. We'll see what happens. I don't hold much hope based on what has happened previously, and to really get at the budget issues, you have to untangle a whole web of things, and that's a whole nother question. Mm-hmm. But yes, I support doing that 100%. We have an alarming number of, for instance, opioid deaths, right, that have occurred. I think over 1,000 something within the last year. That's more people that have been killed by gun violence. That's more people that have been killed in car accidents. That's more like combined, right? Mm-hmm. I forget what the statistic said, but it was an alarming statistic that I saw. Mm-hmm. So money, and we have no mental health facility here in New Orleans, which is another problem. So I would take money from that, obviously, and from the gaming to put into programs like that. And my main goal in that would be creating a centralized facility, such as a mental health facility, where services can be rendered for something like that.
Okay. Was it a mistake to remove City Council from oversight of the Sewage and Water Board?
Sewage and Water Board. Well, if anything could have prevented what happened, I guess I would agree it was a mistake. But I don't know. I don't know that it was. Again, we go back to who best to govern local issues than the local government. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can look. Hindsight can be 20/20 all the time. Would the state oversight have prevented some of the things that happened? I doubt it, because the state had oversight for a time, right? Did. And they didn't fix any of the World War I technology that has been in there, right? So I really don't think that would have made a difference. I think that we just need to do a better job of holding our local leaders accountable. For instance, if we lifted the roadblock to give local leaders the ability to pass a minimum wage, that's on them. They need to act on that, and they need to act in the best interest not only of individual workers but the business community. And they need to engage in the public to do that. Not everything can be put on the state, and should be put on the state or the federal government for that matter.
All right. I want to ask you a question about education and adolescence in particular. Louisiana has an exceptionally high rate of sexually transmitted infections, being ranked second in the nation for those surveyed by a 2016 CDC report. What would you do to address this public health crisis?
Well, I touched on it a little bit with the mental health facility that I think is a really good idea. I host a radio show on WHIV, and obviously our mission is, in addition to independent voices, ending all wars, is the fight against HIV and the recognition of this issue. I think education is a very, very important thing. Sex education. I think it's lost a lot of times because of the conservative nature of our state. I think people don't like to discuss it or don't give it as much attention as it requires. We have, I don't know if you said in the question, forgive me, but the teen pregnancies that we're dealing with, that's all education. Now you're still going to have that issue, but if we can educate and get people to understand what is going to happen or what could possibly happen, or just be smarter about things, I think that you can see a decline in that because there's no reason our numbers have to be that high. I think a mental health facility, in order to address this, can also, like I said, that can be a centralized location. You can have offshoots of different things, sex education programs. You could have, and that can happen through schools as well. Again, if our community had more say-so in our schools, and our community sees a problem with teen and young pregnancies and sex education, these parents can go to their school board that they elect, and they can say, we need to address this. And I think that therein lies an answer, as well as places where you can go for education and help otherwise, like such as a facility.
Will you be willing to make the necessary changes to existing law that stops our state Department of Health and hospitals from asking our children questions about their sex life?
Absolutely. No more needs to be said.
Exactly. Common sense.
Right. That's common sense.
We also have a question regarding maternal mortality. Due to multiple factors, including disparities in prenatal care, in Louisiana, black women are 1.8 times to 3.4 times more likely to die of a pregnancy-associated cause than white women. Question is, what can be done to improve maternal health and patient outcomes for women of color?
I think we're going back to education and the ability to seek information and advice on that pregnancy, right? There's and I don't know if you're going to get to this question. I don't mean to jump to it, but work required Medicaid, right? We're looking at ways to just make it so onerous on our most vulnerable citizens to seek medical care, information, treatment, and what that does is it results in things like this. It results in conditions that are then that are otherwise preventable from not being preventable, right? So a simple issue at pregnancy that could have been avoided early on through information or medical care has now turned into an untenable situation that can result in a more serious situation, including death. And I think that that's what leads to those things is the inability to seek information, the inability to have decent medical care or be able to get to medical care. We're not even talking about transportation issues right now. But if you had the knowledge and the ability to care for yourself in your pregnancy, I think anyone is going to take that, right? Why would you not? So it's obviously an issue of accessibility and then also an issue of information, not having an ability to get that information and that help. So you obviously have to address that.
So how does the legislature increase that accessibility?
Well, everything's money, right? You have to do it through funding, and I hate to keep going back to a centralized facility, but again, we really have no centralized health facility here where people can go. I mean, we have UMC, but what do you have to do to get in there? You have to go to the ER, right? Another place you can get medical attention is the jail, right? There's the two places you can go, but like where else can you go? If you don't have good insurance, or you don't have your own private doctor, you don't have a ride there, you have to go to the ER. And what's the ER going to do? Unless you have a really serious problem, they're going to just send you back home with maybe a prescription or maybe a follow-up date that you're never going to go to, right? So if you had a place where you can go to get information, and you have to fund that place, right? It's a crime that we don't have a mental health facility here in town that's funded, that people who are less or more vulnerable can go to. I think that once you untangle that budget mess and you see where you need money, then I think you need to fund services like this where people can actually go, or you find services that are available and and supplement their funding, so that people can get this information.
Okay. Environmental, renewable energy. So, seeing that the job growth in solar is outpacing oil and coal and is now the fastest growth industry worldwide and in the United States, what will you do to help us reclaim the title of #1 solar city in the country, like we were in 2015 when we had the Louisiana Solar State tax credits?
Well, tax credits could be a good idea. We saw how that worked out. I'm a victim of the tax credit thing. I had solar panels put on my house, and I had to go through the whole hoopla. I drive a hybrid car. I have all the bulbs in my house, and I do everything I can, and I support renewable energy 100%. I would encourage more solar panels, and I didn't know we were #1 actually. I'm glad to hear that at that time. That gives me some hope to say, hey, maybe we should look at that again. Maybe we should incentivize people to get solar panels. But then we're dealing with this gas plant out in Orleans Parish, right? And that's a city council issue, obviously. But I think that no one really is in support of that in the community, from what I hear. But the council is going to pass it, from what I understand, because they think that that's the only way that we can sustain our grid. I don't know enough about that, but I do know this: solar energy is available, it can be used, and we can start transferring to that, and we should. How we do that on a citywide level for New Orleans, I don't know. But if the state can help through tax incentives, through any other incentives or any other means, I'm 100% for it.
Okay.
And I'm also, like I said, a purchaser of them. So,
All right, so it's a harsh reality, as you described, but oil and gas companies hold a lot of influence over politicians in the state of Louisiana. How will you fight to hold oil companies accountable and protect our vulnerable coastline?
oh man, this is this is one that really gets at me. The saltwater intrusion issues, the pipelines. A couple days ago, I want to say 6 or 7 days ago now, Judge Shelley Dick in the Middle District enjoined that pipeline from going, the work going forward. That was a good thing, because otherwise there was going to be a lot of irreparable damage that would have been done. And I don't know how it's going to end up. They might still win on that. But we need to really start taking a strong look at what the scientists are saying locally about saltwater intrusion, about these canals, about whether sediment can be replaced. Some studies say that, look, we're past the time. I think there's a New York Times article recently that said that some of these islands and these bays are just now no longer. I think 30 something or 40 something names have just been wiped off because they're just now in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's only going to continue. And some people are saying we're beyond the point of any return. I don't agree with that. I think that there are ways that we can just prevent some of this stuff. If it came down to what I would choose, obviously I choose Louisiana over oil. So that's not a question. But oil companies are one of several factors, I think, that are contributing to the erosion of the coastline. So any way that we can save the coastline, whether it be through more strict regulations on oil companies, I'm for it. I'm absolutely for it.
Well, you made mention earlier about our budget problems. Will you support a bill ending oil subsidies in the state?
Ending oil subsidies. Well, so we have a lot of incentives that go to oil companies, such as the industrial tax exemption program and things like this, right? Where these companies are getting tens of millions, hundreds of millions over 10 years for either their operations or for investing in the infrastructure in whatever way they say, right? And so we're not getting really anything in return in terms of jobs. I would look at what subsidies we're giving them and then what we're getting in return. And if the balance is off, then of course I'm all for that. Now, it would depend on what specific subsidies. If the subsidies we're giving them are what we need in order to sustain a certain community or certain area, then I have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. But generally, if it's just oil subsidies and they're a detriment to the state of Louisiana, then of course I'm all for ending the oil subsidies. I just have to look at that on a case-by-case basis and know exactly what we're talking about.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
Let's say this plant is built and Entergy starts selling energy to neighboring states and neighboring communities. Do we get a cut of that action?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If that's the case, I mean,
Because we're going to pay for the bill.
yeah, of course. We got to pay for the plant. We got to pay for the workers, and it's a constant. 30. What is it? 30 years, right? Yeah, that we have to pay for this, and so we're not. We're not a charity. I mean, we can't be.
Oh, okay. Well,
the state.
the subsidies and other contracts, it seems as if we're kind of our
Right.
charity.
Right.
Okay. In addition to preventing preemption of local raises of minimum wage, do you support raising minimum wage at? Well, yeah, we already crossed that. Excuse me, at the state level. Sorry. Next question. This question is about a national initiative. This is a yes or no.
Okay.
I'll give you a quick background. In a strict yes or no question, do you support or would you help champion a state resolution to formally call for a limited amendment convention under Article 5 of the Constitution to limit the corrupting influence of money in national elections? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let's see.
You phrase it that way.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay. Prison labor. The use of prisoners for labor is exceptionally pronounced in the South, which has echoes of a plantation system. What policies would you support or laws would you champion that would ban or otherwise curtail prison labor in our state?
Well, obviously, in the criminal justice reform, I think that's a big issue. So, number one, if you want people to work in the prison system, I think it should be they should decide whether they want to do so or not. If they don't want to work, then they can't be forced to work. If they're going to work, then they have to be paid a fair wage, right? And obviously the minimum wage should be raised, but that's another issue that we just talked about. They should be paid a fair wage. And if this is but beyond all this prison work, we're talking about how to get people reintegrated into society, right? If the goal of prisons is to get people rehabilitated, right? And you're talking about recidivism rates and all this other stuff. How do we get people back to be members of society? How do we educate them in prison? Not everybody has to work. Maybe they want to go to school. Maybe they want to learn a trade. How do we get them integrated back into society so that we're not sitting here with privatized prisons just paying for some corporation to keep people locked up and hitting rocks with a pickaxe? That doesn't make any sense, right? And maybe it made sense to people back 40, 50 years ago, but it makes no sense to me today. So I would essentially change the laws to make any work in prisons a decision to be made by the prisoner, and they paid a fair wage, or have other options in order to reintegrate them into society.
Okay. Gun control question. What level of gun control do you support? What will you do as a legislator to change how we manage or regulate our ownership of guns in Louisiana?
I think this again goes to what we were talking about before, how municipalities have the ability to determine what's best for them. And I posted something on Facebook after the tragic massacre in Florida the other week. I support the banning of the sale of assault style weapons, bump stocks, obviously, closing the gun show loophole, and then when I say that, background checks, obviously, in the gun show loophole. But I think that municipalities, again, if New Orleans says that we do not want a certain style of gun sold here, we don't want a certain concealed carry in this part of the French Quarter or something like that. I think that New Orleans is the best place to decide that, and their city council is the best place to decide that. And they can survive, I would hope, some constitutional challenges under strict scrutiny, because this is what they need to keep their community safe. And what might be good for New Orleans might not be good for Alexandria or Shreveport or Ruston, Louisiana, but it's what's good for New Orleans. People can choose to come to New Orleans knowing that you can't carry a gun in the French Quarter, or you can't buy an assault rifle within the city limits, or you can't drive with one in your car. If that's what's going on, then New Orleans they know that coming in, and New Orleans is the best place to make that call. And I would support any legislation that would give them the ability to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to give you a couple minutes of closing, so please tell the Our Revolution folks
Sure.
your closing remarks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm born and raised in New Orleans. I have a lot of family history here. My great grandfather worked at Higgins Shipyards. They were the first racially integrated industry and company in New Orleans. Everyone was paid a fair and equal wage at Higgins Industries during World War II. It all depended on the actual job description and title you had. Nothing depended on race or tenure at the company. So that's really cool. I like where I'm at in life as a civil rights and a fair and equal pay lawyer. I've been doing that for years. I've dealt with fair and equal pay for multiple individuals. Most of my clients are women, unfortunately, based on discrimination, harassment, and fair and equal pay issues. I've dealt with some Title IX issues for people harassed in our state school system. Before that, I was in the film industry for 12 and a half years. So I lean heavily on my business experience as well as my legal experience of actually being in the trenches, seeing what laws work, seeing what laws don't work, and knowing how to fix those laws. It's one thing to say that you know the laws and you've been in government. It's a totally different thing to say you've had to have people who are subjected to these laws, who have had to struggle through these laws, and you've had to fight through them in court every day. So you know what's wrong, and you know what needs to be fixed. And so I'm going to rely on that experience. Also, I'm not a political insider kind of guy. I'm a political outsider. I also rely on my ability to remain as an uncompromised voice. The only people I owe anything to is the people of District 93, which goes into my accountability and accessibility plan of always being there and being a very visible member of District 93, so that anything that I bring to the legislature isn't what I'm bringing, it's what District 93 is bringing. And that's what's most important to me. So I appreciate your support and your vote on March 24th.
Do you have a website?
I do. My website is www.kennybordes.com. I have a Facebook page, Kenny B for HD93, and you can get to Twitter and Instagram through there. And you can email me directly any questions, kcb@kennybordes.com. And I think there's a phone number on there too, and I usually answer the phone as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Kenny.
you.
Best of luck to you.
Absolutely. All right.
All right.
Yeah.